Are there any pitfalls to watch out for? Um, I guess yes, there are quite a few pitfalls to watch out for. Just trying to, you know, again, something we touched on in the previous slide, which was to, just give yourself the space you need and take as much time as you need and allow yourself to feel whatever you are feeling because it is legitimate. And I guess wanting to speed things up, perhaps it's not a race. It takes as long as it takes. Sometimes it takes um, little or a lot longer to come to terms with the magnitude of the loss. Um, and lack of grieving, there could be a multitude of reasons for why perhaps you haven't experienced your loss similarly to somebody else, because again, it goes back to the individual nature of grief, that perhaps it boils down to the relationship that you might have had. Perhaps there's an element of anticipatory grief that happened, and you worked through some of what um, you might experience in the early stages of somebody passing away. And going back to those self-deprecating thoughts that we might experience or we might notice. So it's going back to those slides that we looked at the beginning of the presentation that emotions have three components. So it's about going back and perhaps being the detective in your own grief. So sometimes we have to take a step back and look at what am I thinking? What am I feeling? And how is what I'm thinking and feeling manifesting itself in terms of my behavior? So we may hear ourselves say things to, have negative, what we call in psychology, those automatic negative thoughts. We all have them. It's quite natural to have those automatic negative thoughts, but where we have control over those thoughts is what we do with them. So just to be mindful of what is that thought? Did that thought have a feeling attached to it? Did that feeling then go on to create a sensation in my body? If it did that sensation then manifest itself in a behavior? And then that behavior, how did that impact on my environment? So kind of following on from what's on this slide, okay, so you might hear things like, why am I so cold-hearted? What does it say about me if I can't shed a tear for them? You know, I got over it because I never had a relationship with them. Or, you might hear yourself say things like, you didn't love them much, did you? Um, and kind of tormenting yourself with these, negative questions. Um, so it's a kind of, being the observer or the detective within yourselves and noticing, the relationship that we have with ourselves. So I guess those are things to really watch out for. Um, and I guess, just those key things to remember is grief is something that varies from person to person. It's really quite unkind to compare ourselves to somebody else, because going back to the individual nature of who we are as human beings, we're made up of very different experiences, very different upbringings, very different set of circumstances. So when we look at ourselves and look at other people, have a holistic view of yourself and other people. um yeah, beating ourselves up is, never helpful. So the less of that, the better. And guilt doesn't change anything. Sometimes, yeah, guilt is part and parcel of grief, but those ifs and buts and maybes, they don't really help us to process our grief. They just sometimes keep us prisoner and hold us in those feelings of acute anxiety, perhaps even despair, and and yeah.